again, what we learned so far about the respiratory system. So again, we talked about the anatomy of the respiratory system. We talked about how things like just changes in volumes of your lung changes the pressure, and that drives your breathing in, inspiration and expiration. And also how, again, the pressure changes cause the movement of air, pulmonary ventilation, aka breathing. And then we also briefly talked about diseases and how these can affect your breathing as well. This was the lung volume lecture. And so now we're going to talk about, okay, we know how air moves into the lungs, but how does it get to the rest of your body? All right, so again, diffusion. So this is where we have to go all the way back to last semester, and this is where we will get very chemistry oriented. So again, you move a lot of gases into your lungs, but how do you distribute that to the rest of your body? So again, they need to reach every single cell and tissue. Why? Because remember, every single cell in your body is alive. It needs oxygen. It needs some sort of energy to convert its energy efficiently into ATP. Well, actually, so I should say most cells. We will get to that soon in the semester. But again, so your cardiovascular system and respiratory system, that's why often these two work hand in hand. It's not coincidental that your heart is located right next to your lungs. So they work together to distribute and collect gases. Again, you want to distribute oxygen to all your tissues, but you also want to collect carbon dioxide from the rest of your tissues as well. So it's kind of like mass transport. So some of you might commute, or in happier times, some of you may have like commuted to work and also to UH Manoa, but also once you get on campus, some of you might walk to where you need to get to campus, but can you drive to everywhere on campus? Can you drive up to Villager 152? Not typically, right? So some of you take additional transportation. So again, there's mass transportation as how you move gases from the environment into your lungs. But you also need smaller forms of transportation that allow things to move from your lungs and distribute it to the rest of your tissue. And again, remember this interface between your blood and the alveolar airspace. So you have these two thin membranes right here, right? So you have the endothelium of the capillaries. These are the cells that line your blood vessels, and also the cells that line the alveoli. You do also have this thin fused basement membrane, but again, this is very thin. Why? Because you want gases to diffuse, and that's really easy for these gases to move from the air into your blood right here. So again, you want oxygen from the external environment and your air to move into your blood. And also remember that you produce carbon dioxide as a byproduct of metabolism. So you want to move carbon dioxide from your blood and inside your body and excrete it and move it outside of your body. Alright, so we're going to talk about, so this is like a very general, it's not completely anatomically correct, but it's just showing you like the pulmonary and systemic circuit. But was it talking about? Well, again, remember, that's why you have separate chambers and set the left and right side of your heart. So we're going to talk about this. Okay, how does that oxygen actually get into your blood? How do you remove carbon dioxide from your blood? So this is external respiration. So that's the actual interface between the external air that you breathe in through your mouth and nose, that ends up in the middle, or actually ends up in your side yourself in the alveoli. So how do you get that into your blood initially? Then you have internal respiration. So once it gets to all the tissues inside your body, how do you deliver oxygen to all the tissues inside your body right here? And how do you remove carbon dioxide, excess carbon dioxide from these tissues, and then bring it back to the alveoli? So that's the difference between external and internal respiration. Now again, remember my broad rule of pressure and physiology. Things move from high to low, and this rule will really help you through this lecture. Alright, so this is a picture from your book. So what's it showing? Well, in these little black dots, I think it's representing gas. And of course this blue liquid is some sort of liquid, right? So what happens when you increase the pressure? Well, notice that the amount of these little dots increase inside the blue liquid right here. So the example to use is carbonation. So what happens with carbonation? So yes, if you haven't had chemistry yet, gases can dissolve in liquid. Liquid can, so that's how you carbonate like a soda. You get carbon dioxide, you dissolve it, and you add pressure, so more carbon dioxide is pressurized inside that can. But what happens when you open a can of soda? You decrease the pressure. Why? You no longer have something holding all that pressure in. So again, remember, pressure moves from high pressure to low pressure. So that's why you get all this fizzing, right? Because now you got rid of the decreased volume. You're all of a sudden increasing the volume, decreasing the pressure, allowing that pressure to be released, and this is why you see the fizzing when you open a carbonated drink. Now let's talk about something called partial pressure. If you've already taken chemistry or physics, this might sound familiar to you. So air is not just simply oxygen and carbon dioxide, it's actually a mixture of gases. So true or false? In the air we breathe, most of it is oxygen. Think about it. The answer is actually only 20% or 21%, and I think the exact figure is around 20.9, but for our class, 21% of the air we breathe is oxygen. The majority of the air we breathe is, yeah, maybe I should use Socrative, but yeah, later on. So 78% of the air we breathe is actually nitrogen gas. So most of our air is not oxygen. So there is a small traces of other gases, but what about carbon dioxide? Well, there's also argon, but carbon dioxide in the air we breathe around here right now is only 0.04% carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is a vast minority, that's an oxymoron. It's far from, it's a very small percentage of the air we breathe. So what is this percentage? It's actually not talking about mass or volume or how much of volume the air we breathe is. It's actually, if you counted every single gas molecule in the air and say, okay, what percentage of it is oxygen? What percentage of it is nitrogen? What percentage is carbon dioxide? So it's based on the number of molecules, not mass or volume. So what is partial pressure? So it measures pressure from one gas. So remember, the air we breathe is a mixture of gases. So when you measure partial pressure, you have to indicate and determine, okay, what gas are we talking about? Are we talking about nitrogen? Are we talking about oxygen? Are we talking about carbon dioxide or some other gas? So this is how you calculate partial pressure. You take the air pressure times the percentage of gas in the air. So those were the previous percentages I showed you on the previous slide, aka the mole fraction. So even though partial pressure talks about one gas in particular, sometimes I will just say pressure, and one, it saves me time, and two, sometimes it kind of helps to make it a little simplified in your head. But so that's why sometimes I just talk about pressure. But when I'm talking about pressure, partial pressure of oxygen or carbon dioxide, I'm talking about partial pressure. Okay, so let's do examples. So partial pressure of oxygen. So we're only talking about oxygen. Again, you have all the other gases in air, but let's talk about oxygen just by itself. So how do you calculate it? So again, it's air pressure times the mole fraction. So at sea level, it's about 760 millimeters mercury. Again, don't get hung up about the unit of pressure. But so again, how much percentage of our air is oxygen? Again, roughly just a little over 20%, right? So 21%. So this is how you calculate the partial pressure of oxygen in air at sea level. Just multiply the two. Again, how do you multiply percentage? Just convert to a decimal, make it as 0.21 times it's 760, and it's roughly 160 millimeters mercury. So if you want to do a really rough estimate, what you can do is just divide this by 5. There is a little inaccuracy, but it's an easier way of calculating this. Alright, so say this is a box full of gas, and here in this example, let's just say there's only nitrogen and oxygen. Again, that's the majority of the air we breathe. So we have about 21% oxygen molecules, but what happens if we have less pressure? Well, if we have less pressure inside this volume, we're going to have less molecules. So again, this is about 21% oxygen, but what if we reduce the pressure? If there's less pressure, there'll be fewer molecules in the air. So what do we see? Well, the ratio of oxygen to all the molecules in the air, yeah, it's about the same in each box. But do we have the exact same number of oxygen molecules in each pressure? So the ratio is the same, but count the oxygen molecules. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 1. So again, the mole fraction can remain the same, but as you reduce air pressure, you're actually getting fewer of the molecules and thus fewer of these oxygen molecules if you reduce the air pressure. So again, less oxygen partial pressure means less oxygen molecules.